But somebody who actually makes communication a passionate part of life is Dee Cameron and Domenic Britten, and they're actually going to turn our world upside down, take us from the IBM platform to the Mac platform, which I'm pleased to say works smoothly in the background behind me. They've actually been here at the conference and are a driving force for many companies as consultants. Dee, could you come and give us a bit of an overview of where you are and what you do and the fabulous passion points in your life? Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Dee Cameron, as you just heard, and I'm one of the senior partners. Excuse me. I'm one of the senior partners in Company D. I'd also like to introduce my business partner and creative director, Domenic Britten, who you've probably seen around most of this week. I guess for 2.5 days we've held up the prism to CSR, and we've seen the spectrum of advantages to organisations that embrace the concept, and there's been a lot of debate around that. We've looked at putting CSR, or the CSR business case, to the board, measuring CSR, increasing brand value through CSR, embedding, all those words. And there's been some extraordinary arguments this week, and I've been behind the desk most of the time and been quite distracted, but one of the things that's become very obvious is that there is an enormous amount of work to do, even in trying to find a definition that we all agree with, that we can articulate to all of the areas in which we work. It seems to me that a great deal of the work at the moment revolves around the external communications, or adding management plans or HR initiatives to introduce CSR to an organisation, and business simulations where CSR projects are added to that organisation. But importantly, and I think it was something that Tess said, it seems that it's about adding CSR as a cultural thing to the organisation that we seem to be missing. It seems that if some or all of these steps are taken and the outside world becomes more aware that CSR has become integral to your business, and an increase in brand value and positive public perception, etc., is almost a given. But I think that there's a piece of the puzzle missing if you approach it that way, and it's the piece that you don't see. I mean, as we've learned this week, it can be so difficult to convince others that you work with or your board to adopt CSR in some form, or even getting it over the line as a core strategy in your business takes all of the effort. But the best board decisions and media plans come to nothing unless there's a comprehensive internal communications program to create CSR as part of the core value and core culture of the organisation. It won't happen because it's an edict from marketing or HR or somebody's bright idea, even if there are positive, worthwhile CSR programs to help communities or the environment or all of that good news stuff that Leora was speaking about. It just won't necessarily happen, and it won't become ingrained automatically. Now, we've heard some debate this week about CSR being, a PR move or a fad, or, that it's something that, is a good news story and something good to do. And there's been conjecture about that. But we believe that if your employees are just as much of a key target audience as the diverse external audiences that you're attracting to your business, who are attracted in part by your external communication of CSR initiatives, then you've got to create a separate communication for those people. You've got to focus on the people, and that's where you've got to start. And if you think that they'll just come along for the CSR ride because it's a good thing to do, or there's one passionate person in your audience, then I think you really better think again. Good employees won't blindly accept or act on everything you tell them. That's why they're good employees. The only unintelligent or fearful employees will do that. Assuming you want the best and brightest to embrace CSR as well as the other strategies, then like anyone else, your employees and colleagues need the full treatment for any communications they receive. Research, strategies, creative executions, just like your external audiences. If you don't do this and the messaging falls over, in particular the CSR strategy, then you push so hard to get it through management or get buy-in but can you really be surprised people aren't living it or speaking it? In fact, treating employees as a valid audience requiring the same level of attention and spending as customers, clients, investors, etc. is entirely logical. Yet it's extraordinary how so many businesses don't see it this way. They just don't see it as a necessary thing to do, and they don't see it as a priority, and, you know, sometimes it's even seen as a way to cut costs. We don't need that. What are we going to get out of it? It's just internal, you know. We can have a piss-up. We can have a sales conference. We can just have a Christmas party. It'll be okay. Morale will be fine. We have a picnic. But the logic of prioritising internal communications goes much further than that. Your employees can become individual broadcast nodes for communication of your values, for your brand, obviously, in advertising those within their families, their own communities, and ultimately the outside world. If you win them over first, then you quadruple your chances of winning over everybody who comes into contact with the organisation. The direct deposit into their accounts every fortnight, otherwise known as wages, does not necessarily mandate this task, and I think it is a bit of an overhang from the 20th century when bosses had this clear top-down sort of, dare I say it, you know, a male-dominated view of they've got a job. A bit like Jeff Dixon said recently, you know, they should be glad that they're employed, as if that's like enough. I say it doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. Employees are choosy. Employees are bombarded with information. Employees are very busy. Employees work really, really hard. How are they expected to have a comprehensive knowledge of all of the important issues, and how can they separate, the trivial? How are they expected to embrace and get on board with all of these things? How are they expected to understand the nuances of CSR and the value that it can bring to the company and their jobs? The only possibility of this happening is if the messages have been carefully and consistently and continuously communicated in an integrated way, and that they avoid the rhetoric and the marketing speak and the blah that doesn't have any meaning for the people who are the ambassadors for the brand and the company. Take a tip from the most successful and wealthy organisations in the world, religions. I say this without fear or favour, as it applies to all denominations. They start from within and they go forth and multiply. Whenever they're in trouble, it's not the branding or the advertising strategy, it's the failure of the internal communications that needs addressing. Think of a local church or a temple where numbers and revenue are down because the local rabbi, priest or imam is not connecting or communicating with his internal audience very well. Maybe he's tired or old or lost faith himself. When the communication internally and the problem is fixed, and a dynamic, strategic and effective communication can begin internally, becomes, you know, maybe with a new rabbi, the internal audiences build once more. These internal employees, as it were, are renewed, they start communicating outwardly, and you have a new external audience and profile. So consider the efficiency of using all points of contact in an organisation. It's the idea of developing brand champions to function as ambassadors for the brand, the culture, the company's values and what it stands for. To be effective in this, a consistency of message has to be achieved, and there's little point spending $1 million on consumer research, media advertising to create all that other awareness for brands if those inside the company are not enrolled or informed. As an effective spend, internal communications is emerging as a standout opportunity. We know that mainstream advertising audiences are shrinking. Advertisers have to become broader or sometimes much narrower in getting their message to the customer. These include a full new range of media options, and these options apply to the employees as well as the broader consumer. A great opportunity exists to integrate the corporate message across the board. The digital age is exposing those with dubious dealings, as we've heard this week, corrupt management practices, dishonest reporting, and I say, hallelujah. CSR potentially will go a long way to continuing to raise this consciousness in management teams of tomorrow's leading companies. But unless these messages are communicated from within in a strong, consistent and reliable fashion, then the organisational health, or I think it was Tess called it the cultural DNA of an organisation, it will implode. It must begin at home. It doesn't begin and grow internally. The cleverest external messaging will come unstuck very quickly if you don't do this. CSR is the linchpin to building relationships with employees, then the community, and finally the marketplace, in that order. For some reason, most other organisations and businesses work the opposite way, from the outside in, and then wonder why values, branding and key ideas don't become part of the culture of the business. I'm here to explain that it can be done. There are many ways to do it. We do it at Company D. We help organisations effectively implement the message of CSR from the inside out. And so how do you do that? I'm just going to get a drink of water because I'm really dry. The first tool is a company's relationship with its staff, and the way management approaches its employee relations must always be the starting point. A proactive approach integrated with the company's culture, its people, the operational and financial objectives, of course, are essential as an approach. The second tool is aligning the internal and the external messages. In real terms, making the message the experience rather than some spin or buzz or stuff that doesn't match the experience of the company's culture. The third tool, the most comprehensive of all, is to develop a strategic approach to the content development for internal communications. And this is a very large area, and it includes content, substance, corporate messaging. These areas lead to a complete internal campaign which is conducted across a number of channels using numerous devices, events, digital and analogue media. They must all be aligned. They all have to be saying the same thing. There has to be a strategy behind them, and the opportunity then exists to reinforce that message and have everybody get on board with it, add their bit to it and contribute. You can do it yourself if that's your role, but it's a larger task than even the most diligent communications specialist realises. Sometimes this responsibility can be thrown unfairly to the HR person in an organisation, but it's often added to the marketing and communications responsibilities, who must also deal with the external communications. The external communications cannot simply be shoved over with minor modifications to the internal comms, and this is what we sometimes see happening. You go to a conference and you see the audience, who are a closed audience, it's a private audience, and they're hearing the same stuff that they've been hearing in their management meetings, or they're being taken through a business plan that they already all know. And there's no engagement, and there's no new news about the values of the company and how we're going to reinforce those, or what the vision of it is, or what you're doing in your marketplace and what you're doing with your people. The external communications can't simply be shoved over with these modifications, as I said. So the responsibility, if you tackle it that way, ends up doubling the workload of the underappreciated HR manager or marketing manager who's already got a pretty big job. A common solution for this is to work with a partner in a specialist company like ours, and plenty of our clients have done that with us. And then as a team, we work directly in developing the creative content and strategy of the organisation, obviously with buy-in at a very senior level. And from there, an internal campaign is created. This may involve every possible form of visual communications and event production over a period of time. If it involves events, then they've got to be content-driven and tailored. The business presentations are specifically designed to avoid this, death by PowerPoint. Let's do the business plan again. I've got this thing that works. I'm busy. I haven't got time to prepare, much like me today. And so we torture each other with the same old stuff that we already know. And we could find on the intranet if we really needed to know it. There's no engagement. Typical internal communications campaigns will involve team meetings, virtual notice boards, intranet information, traditional video and DVD, and or interactive DVD programs. But none of these executions, large or small, make any sense unless there's the same level of commitment that's taken place, as that you put into your external messaging. And there must be a complete alignment of those two things. And that includes budgetary. We often have to have an argument about why do we have to worry about production values. We're just talking internally. I mean, my friend's got a camera. We can shoot it ourselves. So there's a whole value system that goes on here sometimes as well, where it's undervalued, if it's valued at all. The next step is to try to make that messaging creative, engaging, good quality, respectful, focused and planned, with communication goals set and met at every step. So we try very hard to set up those objectives in our relationships with our clients from the outset. And most of our current clients seem to be, thankfully, very employee-focused and highly passionate about managing communications, staff consultation and, of course, change. So to give you a clear understanding of how it's possible to implement CSR from the inside out and see that process become part of the complete business turnaround from loss to profit, let me step you through one of our case studies. Just the hub, yeah. Thanks. This was a virtual notice board that came midway through an integrated campaign we were doing with a company. There had been about 17 events up to the point where this was made, and then in their canteen a notice board was put up to try and share information with everybody and get the culture out of this, gee, I'm so busy, I've got all this stuff going on, here's my computer, here's my SMSs, I'm getting in the car, I'm driving. Nobody talked to each other in this organisation. And it's really common when people are very focused on emails, SMSs, being out in the marketplace. They only meet up, for a sales meeting or a work in progress meeting, perhaps once or twice a week. And so they miss that point about the old-fashioned way of meeting in the canteen or talking about someone's holiday or impending, wedding or someone being acknowledged when they're leaving. And so the virtual notice board became something that just was a highlights. But strategically, it got us the opportunity to reinforce the programs that we'd done up to that point and start to just graphically reinforce some of the colours, pictures, those more creative elements that people then started picking up and using themselves in the way they spoke and the way they wrote things. And it was strategic, it didn't look like it, it was very simple. And it wasn't that expensive to try and create these things. But what became really important was to roll them out, much in the same way as you would roll out an external campaign. As I said, there is an extensive range of initiatives, and there were things like a national company conference. But the significant thing there was that it used to be only a sales conference. So the sales guys would all go off, they'd have a conference, and the rest of the company would be like, well, great, what do we get? By shifting that and expanding the invitees list, it suddenly became a conference where they all got to speak to one another. They're a national company, they don't often get together, and it changed the way the whole thing started to work. It started to work in a much more organic way. Again, it was part of the strategy. There was a new distribution partner appointed, and it was very difficult because that particular company was a very old-fashioned, very successful but very old-fashioned company, and this company that it was partnering with were very young and very go-ahead, and the complete antithesis of that in terms of their cultures. So we did a national roadshow where the management team went on the road with a small presentation which was, tacked onto the end of an all-day sales meeting. The rest of the state office was invited to come for the last hour of the day, and a presentation was done that was just down in 50 minutes. Succinct, sharp, just saying this is who we are, this is how we do business, this is what we're about. Here's some little vignettes made on video. They were a bit funny, they were very memorable, and people then got to have some drinks and speak to one another. It all sounds so simple and it all sounds so obvious, but it's remarkable how undervalued this is in organisations. The next thing were a series of marketing videos like you would expect around products and new initiatives and so on, but again, they were done not just as random programs, done in a hurry cheaply. They were integrated into this strategy of what does it look like, what are we saying about ourselves, how can we get some mileage out of this. We started to notice too that there were a lot of young people who were really nervous about presenting and really finding it really difficult, no time, totally intimidated by the parent company when they had to present to them. And so some of the training that we'd given the senior executives when we went on the road with them was then rolled out in a program where one-on-one departmentally we went round the company and said, okay, you're giving a presentation, this is what you need to think about. You need to think about your preparation, who you're talking to, what you should say, where are the opportunities for engagement. And again, a one-day workshop, but to everybody, not just the senior management, to all of the young people who are presenting, worked very effectively. So they started having better business meetings. They started not wasting each other's time. And it was incredibly effective. We staged business meetings, obviously, and the conferences and the workshops, and this allowed us the consistency of theming, as I said. We earned enough trust through this process, and it was very interesting, that we were asked to make a company documentary, and we were allowed to include all areas of the company. They were allowed to speak openly. They were allowed to say whatever they needed to say. It's not something that comes naturally to people because they're usually fearful. But we managed somehow to just get down to the issues. And so it was a wonderful, very open-hearted way of communicating, in that the senior management got to see how some of the middle and junior management felt, but in a humorous but very authentic way. We got to roll it out and discuss it in a private conference where some workshops were then given to support them in their endeavour. The success continues today for that company, and we set up a strategy. It got rolled out over 2 years. They achieved their objective. They went from being in a loss situation with a lot of negativity to being a very positive and very profitable company. And I use it as an example because it took a lot of courage for the CEO, who was also new, to come in and do that and to see that. And in a way, it's a version of CSR insofar as valuing the people first before anything else, putting the money and the time into that and then rolling it out and sticking with it, even though initially there was no agreement. He had a management team who were going, what? Are you serious? We've never done this before. We don't need to do this. The differentiator in internal communications is almost always the appropriate level and use of creative services to develop content and execute productions and events. Like the concept of CSR itself, one good deed does not create a life-changing experience. It's not enough. We don't believe in one-hit wonders, and there can be a more effective way if the senior management values the impact of effective communications. If they don't see the value, as Leora said, then they're probably not people that we should work with, because there's plenty of people who go and do their events and think that the chicken breast and the bows on the chairs and the travel package and the venue is enough. That's an event, it costs us a lot of money, it's 2 days out of everybody's week. I mean, what more do they want? We say the opposite. We say, no, don't do that. Just, go for a picnic and let's be real with each other. And it taps into a few of those things that Gary was talking about yesterday, and also David in the afternoon segment, the last segment of the day, about creating a safe space for people to, do artwork in his case, a wonderful creative experience where people really get to express themselves. It's a hard argument to deliver to tough senior executives, to say, we're going to get everybody together and we're going to get them to paint. But if you look at what the benefits of that are, the benefits of engagement, the benefits of a safe space to be authentic, the benefits of branding inside first, getting the alignment, then taking the message out, believe me, they're remarkable. And obviously, once you get to that point, you can then roll it out to your PR partners, the advertising agency and shareholders. We try to do this with authenticity and humanity and honesty because we know that that's what works. And before we became specialist consultants in this area, some years ago we made a documentary which had a huge emotional and psychological impact right around the world, and it's still being used today. And it won us a Logie, which I'm very proud of. But look, there's not time to go through that with you. I raise it because it became very clear to me that there's really no difference between a social issue documentary and internal strategic communications for employees, because they're actually all about the same thing. They're about being real, they're about tapping into an emotional context, and they're about values. And from a creative point of view, if you can identify that in your audience, whoever they are, then you've got something that really galvanises people in the experience of sitting through a documentary, coming to a conference, or whatever. How much time have I got left? Yeah. I wanted to show you some examples, but obviously we're out of time. But there is a DVD on the registration desk, and we have copies of it, and it's a show reel that gives more case studies of what I've been talking about. Please come and see us and get one. You're welcome, and obviously our website shows a little bit more detail about the case histories. I know I've only focused on one, but thank you, and please, if you want to ask questions.
I think that what's really important is that creation of a positive experience across the board. And I think that a lot of people talk about negative experiences, employee engagement, employee communication in this area. So now it's time for a little bit of audience activity. Pair up with somebody you don't work with and compare notes about if you had to walk into a managing director and the board and say, don't spend $100,000 on a webcast. I have seen employees excited and engaged and committed and passionate about something because of some little thing that happened. Give me an example where you've seen something magical happen with employees, and it cannot cost $100,000 and it cannot be a webcast. Okay, so pair up and just discuss it and pick one of the two of you. You can adjudicate that.
Then you jump the paragraph.
What did you do? It wasn't.
Yeah.
Did you know something quick? Because that place we've got something to run, but I mean, now that I see it, I'm going to take it.
It's the moment's lost.
I mean, I can. Michael says why don't we? I'd be interested to know what they think about what I'm saying. I'm not going to say that. Yeah. Well, they're not going to say that. No, I don't think they're going to. How long does it take?
Audio's down. I just wanted to get back to that.
Just go back to the time. Is it like 3 minutes?
No, it's just 1 minute.
So we'll wrap up with that. Especially if they don't. I can't see Michael or Tess here, can you?
No, you're right. They'd be working at this original time.
Well, isn't that that's the timing I was given? Oh no, I've got 12:25 now.
What time have you got? That's all right.
So you will run your little fingers and finish it.
All right, okay. What can you run though, Dom? So what can you run?
Oh, the open just sudden death, but I mean, I lost the moment really. It's a bit weird.
It's coming. We'll just give you the details.
Okay, guys. Who's sitting next to somebody who's got something like gorgeous and fantastic and exciting? Oh, yes. Okay, please.
I work in the area of art writing, which is really not sexy. And the buzzy bit for me was not employee dependent. It's getting my community to make politicians and their advisors cry. Breast cancer goes and does the story, children's cancer, HIV, they do the story. But suddenly these people are empowered to tell a story. And there's a disgraceful picture we have of people with sex
Yeah, fantastic.
Blow their nose, behaving the noise, and we knew that we don't.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that was how much. But the big boss did that it worked.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand.
Fantastic. That's great. Does anybody else find that their neighbour had a little story like that? Come on, guys. You work in this area all the time. You've got to have thousands of stories. What did you talk about? Yeah.
Nicole told me about valuable water. Valuable water going to have a social function where Nicole and other people do environmental trades, like other engagement projects where they about home water saving, competitions, other trades and stuff.
Yeah. And does it...
No, well, it's quite funny because being from a water authority, we try to encourage people to save water, but when we look at our own employees, they have no idea. So I sent around an email, said anyone interested in this little competition that I'm running, you know, it was basically just products that we had lying around that I was just going to hand out. It wasn't going to cost us any money because we weren't going to use them anyway. And I got about 15 people said, yeah, I'm really keen to win prizes, and at the end of the day, it's been going for 6 months and I can't get rid of them. I want to stop it. I want to keep going to see a full 12 months out. So it's amazing.
Yeah?
And they're learning so much from it.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Excellent.
So is there another one up the back? Our final fling. Yes.
Oh, I just had a little one, but just a small one. I partner in the half hour there, one of our core values is heart, and we also have a very good corporate wellness program that we launched a week ago. I just found this hospital. We're going to get everyone in the whole team, you know, without every single person in the team got up and started.
Excellent. Excellent. Good for you. Yeah. Yeah, good. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions finally of me? Yeah. Sorry, what did you say?
You don't have an HR department.
Yeah. Who do we approach? It depends. I mean, many companies these days have their own event management department, and those people, you know, organise things. But unless you have buy-in from the CEO, unless you have, it's got to be at that level in terms of the broad value system. I mean, it can be delegated anywhere. And we often work with internal events managers who, you know, do all of the arranging, they do it very effectively, and we come in and do the creative with them. But it's got to be endorsed, otherwise there's no point. So you've got to get in front of the decision makers and of course, the person who's going to implement the strategy at a very senior level. Or it's pointless. It is just a random event that's feel good, but, you know, so what? Yeah. Thanks for your time, everybody, and please pick up a DVD if you're interested. Thanks.
Okay, it's been a great session this morning, and but there's more to come. There's more to come. We're going to have a little flashback repeat from Michael, who reckons, you know, just call me Michael. He's in Australia. He reckons that's being casual. It's like, Mick, mate, Mickey, come on, mate, come on, Tessie, come on. Shazza, have we got a Shazza in the room? Shazza hasn't been here today, Friday. Mufti Day, love it. Compulsory casualness, Friday. Dress cool, dress down. That's the order. So, it's been a long morning. I'll put the blinds up in a minute.